Welcome to Audio Gyan with Kedar Nimkar, a podcast that documents insightful conversations with Indian designers, artists, musicians, writers, thinkers, and creatives of all types. Catch us on iTunes or visit audiogyan.com for more Gyan sessions. Here's your host, Kedar Nimkar.
Today I have Alicia Souza with us on Audio Gyan. Alicia is a designer, illustrator, and an entrepreneur. She did her communication design from Melbourne and then worked briefly with Chumbak. She now has her own online store called aliciasouza.com, where she sells her design through stationery, home accessories, apparel, and more. Today we are here to discuss some bits of her journey, but more importantly, about illustrations, cartoons, and comics. So thank you, Alicia, for giving your time, and it's a real pleasure to have you on Audio Gyan.
Oh, pleasure being here.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we'll be speaking about cartoons and illustrations. So
Right.
the first thing which I want to ask you, and which will also set the context to this conversation, is what is the significance of cartoons or comics in the world of arts?
So I believe cartoons and comics, for that matter, have usually a story to tell. I think it's a form of storytelling, and it's sequential, and it's not abstract in the way that it is. Even though there's a bit for the reader to put their own mind to it and figure out what they're saying, and you can take a message of it, it's not as abstract as, say, a painting that is, a bolt of colors, and you make sense of it in your own way, and that's it. In that way, I think comics have is a beautiful way of just telling a story. Sometimes it can be lighthearted, sometimes it doesn't have to be, depending again on the story.
Correct.
It's a beautiful way of doing that, I guess.
So there are like different political cartoons and
Absolutely.
social...
Political cartoons, and now, of course, a lot of indie comics, especially in zines, have come up. So even small little things in everyday lives are being told through comics, and and even what I end up doing is I don't do too many sequential ones, but I do a few single panel comic cartoons, and even though it's just a line, it kind of tells you so much about like a character or a personality, especially if there's a it's a repetition of a character, if that makes sense. It's just...
But what goes into it? I mean, as you mentioned just now, when there's a small one-liner and the character itself,
Right.
but it tells a lot behind the story. So,
Right.
What does it take? Is it intentionally by the illustrator to do that, or the person has to be politically or at least socially aware of things happening?
So it depends on what. Firstly, it definitely depends on what the illustrator or comic or cartoonist wants to say. So I'm going to talk about perhaps how I read Peanuts as a child. Reading one comic strip is not going to tell you so much about the characters in there, but as you read, you go on, you understand someone like how Charlie Brown and that is a little confused and a little muddle-headed, but also at the same time such a sweet boy. And you understand, I think, and that over a period of time, over a period of reading a few more of them. So on its own, it stands as a story, but the more you read, the more you understand each character, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
But sorry, it's coming back to politics. Like politics, the comics or cartoons for politics itself is based on what's happening. So, of course, you do need to know context. If you don't know what's happening in the world, you're not going to completely comprehend what that comic is about. Yeah.
And one more thing which I've also been trying to ask. So I did one audio gan with Ashwini Menon. She's a comic. She writes ecotism on The Hindu.
Right.
And one of the things which I asked her was that why does it's generally perceived comics to be either children's thing,
Right.
or then something which is very high end. There's nothing
Right.
in between for light entertainment, which I think your work is slightly trying to do, right?
I hope it is. I mean, I know that my target audience, or at least the most number of people, but this may be biased because I'm online and most of the people online, well, not most of the people, but
Yeah.
my age group is generally between 20 to 35, 40. There are, of course, younger people and there are older people as well. And I think that's true. The only reason it's conceived as, comics itself, the word is still known as something that youngsters would read is because I think they're given that when they're young, like Tinkle. But there has always been a genre of comics that have been for regular middle-aged people who just like to read. And it doesn't mean it's entertainment only. Like sometimes it's informative, sometimes it's like, it's, again, like I mentioned, it's like instead of a novel, you can read a graphic novel.
Correct.
And there's so much more there's so much visually going on as well. There's so much more to interpret as well. And also, I think now, especially now, there's so many more comic book artists coming up in India, and we have a Comic Con, which I wish would do so much more for the Indian comic as opposed to just getting Marvel and DC here, because there's such beautiful comic artists. And now there's, I think Bombay Underground sells a lot of zines, so many people are doing it and selling it. And funnily enough, I went to Blossoms the other day and I found these zines selling there, which was amazing. So I think that world is opening up, and the readership also is opening up a lot more.
Yeah. It's a good time for...
It's fantastic, yeah.
You have a distinct style of annotations. Like if someone searches for Alicia Souza on Google searches, you see a lot of artwork which has got a lot of annotations. So can you tell us how did you explore this style? I mean, what was your source of inspiration? How did you land up in this styling?
So let me start with when I was younger as in like college days kind. When I used to draw then, my style was completely different. And in fact, every 6 months I'd change it drastically. Like if you look at them, you won't even know it's me. There are times when it was really dark, and most of the time it was lighter. But one time I remember one of the styles was really dark. Like my sister was like, "So who drew these?" And I had to tell her it was me, and she did not believe that and stuff. The only reason that I came to the style that I do now is purely because of work. Like I remember when I moved to Bangalore and we were working on Chumbak. That was the quickest way I could, and I was doing all the artworks, all the drawings and stuff like that. So that means I had to produce so much work, and this was the quickest way I could. So I developed a style for that, for creating something quick and something I could, and that's how the style developed. And from there I moved on, and so it became from quick to me trying to slow it down a bit. I'd like to think I'm still evolving. So now it takes me a little longer for a drawing, because I try to encourage myself rather to take longer to do a drawing, so I can put in more details and can put in more texture and stuff like that. But primarily it's because of, I want to say lifestyle, though that's not the right word to use, but purely because I have so much to do, and that's the quickest way I can do it.
Cool. Again, in one of your interviews, you mentioned agencies choosing over photography, as in choosing photography over illustrations.
Right.
I think it was in Design Fabric or some place where I read.
Right.
So, do you think photos are in general more powerful than illustrations, or how do you see photos, illustrations in what's your perspective towards looking at it?
So people, of course, they do take photos over illustration, primarily because I think you can direct a photo a little more easy. Like it's definitely you can direct a photo a little more easily. You can visualize it, I think, more easily. Like someone in an agency, or if you're trying to convince a client, it's easier to talk about like a person's going to be standing like this, as opposed to an illustration where you're thinking about how the person itself looks. It's a little harder because then you go with style and stuff like that. Secondly, I think one of the reasons why photographs is used also a little bit more is because people tend to be attracted to people like faces, and of course, like more facey, the most faces.
Correct.
Faciest, is that a word? The most realistic depiction of a face is, of course, through a photograph. And it would just be so much harder to get a painter to paint a face every time there's an ad campaign, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So just in terms of delivery, it seems to be like the quickest way, I think. And because, of course, it's easier also to depict something, say, like jewelry or whatever it is. It's just a different style of doing it with illustration. But the easier route, I guess, would be through photography. Of course, this all depends on the
client also.
The client and the photograph itself, because there can be one photograph taken that takes you forever to take, and maybe as long as illustration, just depends on what is required.
You have any particular case study or any instance where you remember that illustrations have proven to be more powerful than a particular...
So I'll always be a little biased, I think, because I'm an illustrator. So I find illustrations work so much better for so many more things than they're used. But I know for a lot of real estate things, like I remember, I think there was a campaign, I can't remember the name of the real estate agent that used illustrations for, I think instead of putting a picture of a tree and saying "Welcome to Paradise" rubbish that they put out for most of the real estate things that are out there, and used illustration that was really nice. I cannot remember the name of the I cannot remember. But it just worked so much nicer because they were able to depict I think a feeling more than and also things you can't depict, like you can I mean that time I think there were no drones and stuff like that. So like even an aerial view could be skewed to put it in with an illustration as opposed to like a top view of a photograph is not as pleasing most of the time also. So depending, but it just works so much better. That was one instance where I like clearly remember that worked really well.
Interesting. Actually, I have few more questions, but even I am struggling to come up with it. So is there like this one is particularly like my personal curiosity.
Sure, okay.
Is there like a creator's block similar to a writer's block when you are especially working on a non-commissioned work?
Yes, absolutely. Okay, so when I was younger, again, I'm going back, right? When I was in school and college and stuff, when I didn't really have to create, like, I mean, besides college work, really, but I used to every time. There were times when I used to just be like, I'm like, I just don't know what to draw, like, I'm blank. Now, of course, it doesn't happen at all. And I don't know, there are two reasons which I think perhaps is why this doesn't happen. But it definitely does happen, though, like, and everyone works differently. At least I'm talking in my instance.
Correct.
One is because I work all the time. So now I've been freelancing for 6 years, which is a rather long time. And that's a continuation of work and personal work. So there's a lot always to do. So even if I don't have something to think of for my personal thing to draw, I know there's always client work I have to do and like or create because I need to use it for like my company or something like that. So there's always a need. Secondly is how I store ideas. So now, because every time I think of something that I want to do or draw, I tend to write notes about it so then I can refer to it later. So even if I say, like, right now, if you give me a paper and I'm like, I don't know what to draw, I have a list of things I can draw out. So that becomes like almost like a
reference.
Yeah, a reference
for you
to like things to draw kind of thing. So that way I'm never ever stuck. So even if, but there are, mind you, times when this is not a block, but it's just like everything is rubbish today. Everything I do is rubbish today. Days that always happens. I mean, I think everyone has those days where even I have a few friends who are writers, and they also have those everything I write today is rubbish kind of thing. That happens a lot more, I would say.
And what is the balance between trying to explore a different style or it's always telling a story and the style remains the same? So there are two aspects to it, right?
Yes.
So which one are you more inclined towards, what exercise, and what's the motivation also behind it?
So and that's a really good question, because a lot of people who are starting out tend to get worried about this. In fact, even I used to worry about like style versus content. I remember, so when I was in Melbourne and I was working as a freelancer, but I was just starting out, I used to work with this guy, an illustrator called Bill Wood. He's a really dear friend, like really, really a dear friend. And he even though I know his style, like someone who looks at his work would be like, he can do a lot of things because he can paint as well as do cartoon characters and like stuff like that. And for him, so all the clients he got were from all over the place because he could do everything from instructional illustrations. So like like if you're just saying how to open a carton, he'd be able to do that, and all the way to a children's book. When I moved to India, and I mentioned that I started getting I had so much work to do that I had to boil down to the style. That's the only reason I didn't change. Initially, it used to bug me a lot because I really did want to do explore different styles. But now I realize that most of my clients come to me for that particular style.
Okay.
So now when I do get the very rare occasional client who will be like, "Can you do this?" Kind of thing, I just say no because now I know it's easier for me to just do this style and I get enough work to continue in this way. So I think it works both ways, and it purely depends on the person. Some people can do multiple styles and it bores them to do just one thing, and some people really cannot. But both ways, I think there are pros and cons because if you have a style, you're only known for that. So people who have something serious to say, so say a really strong campaign or something, you're not going to approach me because mine's really lighthearted, even if I may be able to do it. Versus someone on the other side where people would come to them for anything and everything, which means they'll have a broader spectrum of work, but they won't be known for a certain style kind of thing. They're known for execution. And it's just the type of work you do. It's so personal. And I just tell people not to stress about it, even though people really do for no reason. But that works so much. It works so well. Even if you're working in an agency or working as a freelancer, that just be able to do a lot of stuff as well is super useful. Yeah.
And what's your personal preference, content over style?
I mean, now for me, I absolutely love drawing in the way I do because it's almost become an extension of me in a way. So now I love that. But because I know Bill especially, he's my because I know his work. And the amount he can do, that also is wow, that is amazing. And I feel like I miss out on a lot of things. So I feel bad that I don't get to explore in different styles because if I have a little time to explore, I'll end up exploring in my style and pushing that forward as opposed to let's try something completely different just because there's no time. Yeah.
But then what challenges you? I mean, in terms of the content or the way it is communicated?
So if you have a certain style, obviously then you're not challenged in terms of how you're going to execute it because you already know in that kind of style how you're going to draw. But I think if you're not and you have multiple styles, I think you kind of know which one you usually take. I'm not too sure.
No, let's park this point for now where you have a particular style that's given.
Sure.
So then when a client approaches you, there is something to be communicated with the audience also, and then there is something to be understood for your the way how you would put it. Right. So and the type of content also, whether it's I don't know whether it's politically inclined, whether it's business driven, whether it's health and lifestyle driven. So these topics are difficult to comprehend and understand, or you can pick up any domain, but the depiction is something which challenges more. Right.
So when a client gives me a brief, if I understand this correctly, when a client gives me a brief, my main job, and I always say this part is the job part of it, is to communicate what they want to communicate. It does not have anything to do with what I feel like communicating and what, personally I feel towards it. It's a job that they need communicated, and hence I will communicate it as they need and see fit. There are times when, of course, if I think, something else will work, I will always suggest it. I think that's also part of my job to educate a client if there's something that I think visually works on an alternate way. And I think I've had really nice clients where they actually do respond usually. Well enough to take heed to what I say. So there's never been too much of a ruckus between, trying to push and pull between a client and my work kind of thing. But it's always what needs to be delivered is first. I think this comes from me being a designer first as opposed to an artist first. So I find there's a big difference because as a designer, your main goal and aim for most projects is to deliver a message, and it does not involve you as a person and does not involve your your work coming through. But as an artist, your main aim is to be express yourself and stuff, and that's definitely not the case. So when I talk about illustration, and I talk again, like I always talk about not youngsters, but people who want to start out. I always talk about there are two types of illustration you can do. There's one for you, and there's one for clients, and you have to understand clients' work is work, and it's not going to be the case of it's so different from it being a hobby. Like it's work. You have to deliver and everything in terms of what they need, and also in terms of course your time and all that stuff.
Okay. Yeah. Brilliantly put that it's designer first. Alicia, I would like to conclude with one last question.
Sure.
Which I don't know whether the answer would be preachy, but still it's slightly a cliche question.
Okay.
So being also an entrepreneur,
Right.
Besides an illustrator and a designer now, how do you see an artist's future who want to specialize in comics, cartoons? So what are your thoughts? And I mean, not advice as such, but how do you see how if a person wants to explore this field,
Right.
what could be the possible avenues or
Right. Firstly, I would definitely tell them they are the best time of their best time, I think, to be in that field. Because so many things are opening up.
Okay.
And I like the word you used, explore, because that's truly what people have to do. Like if they want to start out in any field, you have to explore the different avenues that are available. There's never, and I find a lot of people who are starting out tend to think there's only one route, but there's so many routes in terms of you can be a book, even when it comes to illustration, you can just be a book illustrator and children's book illustrator. You can get down to the nitty-gritty of every field. So if there's a comic artist, say, who wants to get into comic books, even in that, there are people who want to publish. So there are writers who want to publish their writings in a comics book. So then you have to understand, do you also want to do the writing part of it? So then you can work with publishers, or whether you want to self-publish, that's another ballgame altogether. So, but, and then maybe exploring all of that and realizing what you do like. But I think the main thing is to explore. And we have avenues like your Comic-Con, and we have independent publishers as well. I think Kukachi is one of the indie, can I call them indie comic book publisher? And so meeting all these people, and also definitely talking to your other fellow comic book artists and stuff. Just will
the web comics which is coming up.
Absolutely. And now because of course the internet is amazing in terms of the amount of wealth of information, and also the fact that you can reach out to people is if one person doesn't, there's so many other people. And I think there's enough space. Everyone always gets worried about there are too many people in the field, but there's never enough people in the field. I mean in any field, the market just opens up the minute the number of people in that field increases. And I think it's just this innate fear of being pushed to the bottom, but it's not. If you are scrounging as much as the other person, you're always in the playing field kind of thing.
Cool. All right, I think these were the few questions which I had. Obviously, there are a few more things. Lot of things actually to be discussed, but I think this is a good note to end this.
Cool. Thank you so much.
It was lovely talking to you.
It was a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And that's it from today's Gyan session. Catch us on iTunes, Savan, Stitcher, or any podcasting app you use. Do rate us on iTunes and follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. Stay tuned for more Gyan on audiogyan.com. Till then, bye.